You think you're stuck, that something is holding you back, that life isn't moving the way it should. You look around, and it feels like others are progressing, growing, becoming more. And you feel like you're in the same place, not failing, but not moving forward either. So you ask, what's wrong with me? Why am I not improving? Why does everything feel slow? And you search for answers, external ones. You blame circumstances, you blame timing, you blame opportunities. You think, maybe I don't have what it takes. Maybe I need more time. Maybe I just haven't found the right path yet. But the truth is, it's not that you're stuck. It's something else. Something closer. Something inside you. Something you don't question because it feels like you, it sounds like you, it thinks like you. But it's not your growth. It's your ego. That voice in your head that protects you, that defends you, that justifies your current position, that tells you you're already doing enough. You don't need to change. You're fine the way you are. And you believe it because it feels comforting, because it removes pressure, because it protects your identity. But that's exactly why it's dangerous. Because ego doesn't push you forward. It keeps you where you are. It avoids discomfort. It avoids challenge. It avoids anything that questions who you are right now. Because growth requires change, and change threatens ego. So ego fights it, quietly, subtly, without you realizing it. Every time you feel challenged, ego reacts. It says, I already know this. I don't need to learn that. That's not for me. Every time you fail, ego protects. It says, it wasn't your fault. The situation was unfair. You didn't really try anyway. Every time you see someone doing better, ego compares. It says, they're just lucky. They had advantages. They're not that special. And slowly, without noticing, you stay the same. Not because you can't grow, but because your ego doesn't want you to. Because growth requires humility, and ego rejects humility. Growth requires learning, and ego hates feeling like a beginner. Growth requires admitting, I don't know enough, and ego refuses that. So it keeps you comfortable. It keeps you confident, but not improving. It keeps you safe, but not evolving. And that's the trap. You feel okay. You feel stable. You feel like you're not doing anything wrong. But you're not doing anything right either. Because ego has convinced you that where you are is enough. And that's the biggest lie. Because you're not stuck. You're protected. Protected from growth. Protected from discomfort. Protected from change. And that protection is costing you your progress, your potential, your future. But you don't see it. Because ego doesn't show itself as the enemy. It shows itself as you, your thoughts, your opinions, your identity. And questioning it feels like questioning yourself, which is uncomfortable, which is difficult, which is why most people don't do it. They stay inside their ego, inside their beliefs, inside their current version of themselves, and they call it being who I am. But being who you are is not the goal. Becoming more is. And ego stops that. Unless you see it, unless you recognize it, unless you're willing to challenge it. Because until you do, you'll keep thinking you're stuck, when in reality, you're just not moving. Not because you can't, but because your ego won't let you. And nobody is coming to save you from that. Because this battle is internal, between who you are and who you could become. And the only thing in the way is your ego. So the question is, are you willing to face it? Or are you going to keep listening to it? Because whatever you choose, that becomes your life.
You think you're confident. You carry yourself like you know what you're doing. You speak with certainty. You act like you understand things. And on the surface, it looks strong. It looks like self-belief. It looks like confidence. But is it? Or is it something else? Because real confidence, it grows, it evolves, it learns, it questions itself. But ego doesn't do that. Ego pretends. It pretends to know. It pretends to understand. It pretends to be enough, even when it's not. And that's the difference. Real confidence pushes you forward. Ego keeps you where you are. Because real confidence says, I can learn. Ego says, I already know. Real confidence says, I can improve. Ego says, I'm already good enough. Real confidence accepts feedback. Ego rejects it. And that's where the trap begins. Because when ego disguises itself as confidence, you stop growing, you stop learning, you stop questioning, you stop improving. Not because you don't want to, but because you think you don't need to. That's the illusion. You believe you're progressing, but you're not. You're just maintaining your current level, your current mindset, your current identity. And that's enough to keep you stuck. But you don't feel stuck. You feel okay. You feel capable. You feel like, I've got this. And that feeling, it's dangerous because it removes urgency. It removes pressure. It removes the need to change. And without that, there is no growth. Because growth requires discomfort. Growth requires admitting, I don't know everything. I'm not where I should be. I need to improve. But ego doesn't allow that. It protects your identity. It protects your image. It protects the version of you that you've become comfortable with, even if that version is limited. That's the cost. You stay confident, but not progressing. You stay comfortable, but not evolving. You stay stable, but not growing. And over time, that becomes your reality. A life where you feel okay, but you're not moving forward. A life where you believe you're doing enough, but you're not reaching your potential. And the worst part, you don't even realize it, because ego keeps telling you, you're fine, you're doing good, you don't need to change. And you listen, because it feels good, because it feels safe, because it protects your self-image, but it's holding you back, silently, consistently, without resistance. Because it doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like strength, but it's not. It's stagnation, disguised as confidence. And that's why it's dangerous, because you won't fix something you don't see as broken. You won't improve something you believe is already good enough. You won't challenge something you think is correct. So you stay in the same place, with the same mindset, with the same limits, thinking you're progressing when you're not. And that's how ego traps you, not by stopping you completely, but by slowing you down, by convincing you you've already done enough. And that's enough to keep you average. Because average people don't think they need to improve. They think they're fine. And that belief, it keeps them there forever. Unless they question it, unless they challenge it, unless they see the truth. That confidence without growth is not strength, it's limitation. And if you want more, you need to let go of that illusion. You need to accept you don't know everything. You're not where you could be. You have more to learn, more to improve, more to become. And that's not weakness, that's power. Because awareness creates growth, but ego blocks it. So now you have to decide. Are you going to protect your ego, or are you going to build real confidence? Because you can't have both, not fully. One keeps you safe, the other makes you grow. And whatever you choose becomes your life. Because nobody is coming to save you. And the confidence you feel right now is either building you or quietly keeping you small.
There are moments when someone tells you something about yourself, not to hurt you, not to attack you, but to show you something you can't see. A mistake, a weakness, a behavior, something you need to improve. And in that moment, you have two options. You can listen or you can defend. And most of the time, you defend. Not out loud, not aggressively, but internally, quietly, instinctively. Because something inside you reacts immediately, before you even think. A tension, a resistance, a voice that says, "That's not true. They don't understand. They're wrong." And you believe it because it protects you, because it keeps your image intact, because it avoids discomfort. But what you don't realize is that moment, that reaction, is your ego, protecting you, not from harm, but from growth. Because feedback is a mirror. It shows you what you can't see on your own. It reveals blind spots, things you've normalized, things you've accepted, things you don't question anymore. And that's valuable, incredibly valuable, because you can't fix what you can't see. But ego doesn't want you to see it, because seeing it means admitting something, admitting that you're not perfect, that you have flaws, that you need to improve. And ego hates that. It hates feeling exposed. It hates feeling wrong. It hates feeling less than what it believes you are. So it reacts. It blocks. It deflects. It creates excuses. It's not that serious. They're just being negative. They don't know the full story. And just like that, you ignore the feedback. You move on. You protect your ego. But you also lose the opportunity to grow. That's the cost. Every time you reject feedback, you stay the same. Every time you defend yourself, you reinforce your current level. Every time you avoid the mirror, you remain blind. And over time, that blindness becomes your limit. Because now, you can't see your weaknesses. You can't see your patterns. You can't see what's holding you back. Not because it's not there, but because you refuse to look at it. And ego makes that easy. It makes ignorance comfortable. It makes blindness feel safe. It keeps you staying the same, feeling justified. But growth requires the opposite. It requires discomfort. It requires honesty. It requires looking at yourself without filters, without excuses, without protection. And that's hard, because it challenges your identity. It forces you to confront things you'd rather ignore. But that's where growth lives. Not in comfort, not in validation, but in truth. The truth you avoid, the truth you resist, the truth that makes you uncomfortable. Because that truth, it's real, it's accurate, it's necessary. And if you accept it, you improve, you adjust, you become better. But if you reject it, you stay in the same place, with the same flaws, with the same limits, thinking you're fine when you're not. That's the trap. Ego doesn't just block criticism, it blocks awareness. And without awareness, there is no growth. Because you can't change what you don't recognize. So you stay stuck, not because you can't improve, but because you don't see the need to. Because ego has convinced you you're already good enough. And that belief, it's dangerous. Because it closes the door to improvement. It stops you from learning. It stops you from evolving. It keeps you inside your current version forever. Unless you break it. Unless you choose differently. Unless you listen. Even when it's uncomfortable. Even when it hurts. Even when it challenges you. Because that's the moment that matters. The moment where you hear something you don't want to hear. And instead of rejecting it, you pause. You consider it. You ask, what if this is true? And that question, it changes everything. Because now you're open. Open to growth. Open to change. Open to becoming more. But only if you're willing.
willing to let go of your ego, willing to accept imperfection, willing to admit, I need to improve. Because that's not weakness, that's strength, real strength, the kind that leads to growth, the kind that leads to progress, the kind that takes you forward, while ego keeps you in place. So now you have to choose, protect your image or improve your reality, because you can't have both, and whatever you choose will define your life, because nobody is coming to save you. And the mirror you keep avoiding might be the only thing that can set you free.
You think you're choosing comfort, but you're not. Comfort is choosing you, pulling you, keeping you exactly where you are. And the reason it feels so natural is because your ego supports it, protects it, justifies it, because comfort and ego work together, quietly, powerfully, without you even noticing. You wake up and you don't feel urgency. You don't feel pressure. You don't feel the need to push yourself. Everything feels okay. And that's the problem. Because okay is where growth dies. Not in failure, not in struggle, but in comfort. Because comfort doesn't challenge you. It doesn't question you. It doesn't demand more from you. It lets you stay the same. And ego loves that. Because ego wants stability. It wants to protect your current identity. It wants to avoid anything that makes you feel small, that makes you feel like a beginner, that makes you feel like you're not enough. So when something difficult appears, something that could push you forward, ego steps in, immediately, quietly. It says, that's too much. That's not necessary. You don't need to do that. And you listen, because it feels logical, because it feels reasonable, because it feels safe. But it's not logic. It's protection. Protection from growth. Because growth requires discomfort. Growth requires effort. Growth requires stepping into situations where you don't feel confident, where you don't feel in control, where you don't feel comfortable. And ego hates that because it threatens your image. It threatens your identity. It threatens the version of you that you've built in your mind. So instead of pushing forward, you step back. You choose comfort. You stay where you feel capable, where you feel in control, where you feel good about yourself. And that becomes your zone, your comfort zone, a place where you don't feel challenged, a place where you don't feel pressure, a place where everything feels manageable. And that's exactly why you stay there, because it feels good, because it feels safe, because it protects your ego. But what it doesn't do is make you grow, because growth only happens when you step outside that zone, when you challenge yourself, when you do things that feel uncomfortable, that feel uncertain, that feel difficult. But ego doesn't let you do that. It convinces you you're fine here. You don't need more. You're already doing enough. And slowly, you believe it. You accept it. You live by it. And that becomes your life. A life that feels comfortable, but doesn't progress. A life that feels stable, but doesn't evolve. A life that feels okay, but never becomes great. And that's the trap. You're not forced to stay. You choose to stay every single day. Through small decisions, through small excuses, through small moments where you could have pushed yourself, but didn't. And those moments, they add up. They build your reality. They define your future. Because every time you choose comfort, you reinforce it. You make it stronger. You make it harder to leave. And every time you avoid discomfort, you weaken yourself. You reduce your ability to handle challenges. You reduce your growth. And over time, that becomes your limit. Not because you can't do more, but because you don't. Because ego has convinced you this is enough. And that belief, it's the biggest barrier. Because it stops you from even trying. It stops you from even considering what more could be. And without that, There is no growth. There is no evolution. There is no change. Just repetition. Just routine. Just the same life, over and over again. And the worst part? You're not feeling stuck. You feel comfortable. And comfort is the perfect disguise because it hides the truth. It hides the fact that you're not moving forward, that you're not becoming more, that you're staying in the same place year after year. And one day, you'll realize it, not suddenly, but gradually, through small thoughts, small regrets, small moments where you feel like there should be more. But by then, it's harder to change, harder to push, harder to break the pattern, because comfort has become your default, and ego is still protecting it, still telling you, it's okay, you're fine, you don't need to change. But now you see it, now you understand it, and that changes everything, because awareness breaks the illusion. It shows you that comfort is not neutral. It's a choice that either keeps you the same or pushes you forward. And now you have to decide. Stay comfortable or grow. Protect your ego or challenge it. Stay where you are or become something more. Because you can't have both. Not fully. And whatever you choose will define your life. Because nobody is coming to save you. And the comfort you keep choosing might be the very thing that's keeping you from everything you want. There's something you've been avoiding, not because you can't do it, not because it's impossible, but because of how it makes you feel. Small, inexperienced, like a beginner. And that feeling, it's uncomfortable. It challenges your identity. It makes you question yourself, because in your mind, you're not supposed to be that person, the one who doesn't know, the one who struggles, the one who makes mistakes. But that's exactly where growth begins, and that's exactly what your ego avoids, because ego hates being a beginner. It hates not knowing. It hates looking inexperienced. It hates being in a position where you're not in control. So instead of starting, you delay, you think, you plan. You tell yourself, I need more time, I need to prepare, I'll start when I'm ready. But that's not preparation, that's avoidance. Because the real reason you're not starting is not lack of knowledge, it's fear. The fear of being seen as less, the fear of making mistakes, the fear of not being good enough. And ego protects you from that. It tells you you're already good at other things. You don't need to do this. It's not worth it. And you listen because it saves your image. It protects your identity. It keeps you in a position where you feel competent, where you feel capable, where you feel like you know what you're doing. But that comfort comes with a cost, the cost of growth. Because every skill you want, every level you want to reach requires you to start at zero, to be bad, to be inconsistent, to struggle, to learn. But if you avoid that stage, you avoid the entire process. You never begin. And if you never begin, you never grow. It's that simple. But ego complicates it. It makes starting feel like a threat, like something to avoid, because it doesn't want you to look weak, even temporarily, even for a moment. It wants you to stay in areas where you already feel strong, where you already feel confident, where you already feel comfortable. But those areas, they don't change you. They maintain you. They keep you at the same level. And over time, that becomes your limit. Not because you can't go further, but because you refuse to start from the bottom, because you refuse to be a beginner. And that's the irony. You want to improve, you want to grow, you want more, but you're not willing to go through the stage that makes it possible, the uncomfortable stage, the awkward stage, the learning stage, where you don't look impressive, where you don't feel confident, where you don't know everything. But that stage is necessary. It's not optional. It's not avoidable. It's the foundation. And without it, there is no progress. There is no development. There is no transformation. Just intention. Just desire. Without action. And action is what you're avoiding. Because ego tells you, stay where you're good. Stay where you're comfortable. Stay where you're already someone. But growth requires the opposite. It requires you to become no one so you can become someone new. And that's the part you resist because it feels like losing something, losing your status, losing your confidence, losing your identity. But you're not losing, you're rebuilding, reconstructing, becoming something more. But ego doesn't see it that way. It sees it as a threat, so it stops you before you even begin. And that's why you're stuck, not because you don't know what to do, but because you won't allow yourself to be bad at something new, to struggle, to learn, to grow. And until you accept that, nothing changes. You'll keep thinking, keep planning, keep waiting, but not doing. And doing is the only thing that moves you forward. So now you have to decide, are you willing to be a beginner? Are you willing to look inexperienced? Are you willing to struggle for something better? Or are you going to protect your ego and stay where you are? Because you can't have both. You can't grow and stay comfortable at the same time. You can't improve and avoid being a beginner. You can't become more without going through less. That's the truth, and it's not easy, but it's necessary, because nobody is coming to save you, and the life you want is on the other side of the stage you keep avoiding. So stop waiting, stop delaying, stop protecting your ego, and start, even if you're bad, even if you're slow, even if you don't know everything, because that's where growth begins. Not in perfection, but in starting. And the moment you accept that, you stop being stuck and start becoming.
You look at others constantly, not always consciously, not always intentionally, but you do. You see what they're doing, you see where they are, you see how far they've gone, and without realizing, you start comparing your progress, your results, your life to theirs. And in that moment, something shifts inside you, not always in the same direction. Sometimes you feel inferior, like you're behind, like you're not enough, like you'll never reach that level. And other times you feel superior, like you're better, like you're ahead, like you're doing just fine. But both of those feelings come from the same place, your ego. Because comparison is not about growth, it's about identity. It's about where you stand relative to others. And ego uses that to protect you, to comfort you, to justify you. If someone is ahead of you, ego says, they had advantages, they got lucky, they're not that special. And suddenly, you feel better, not because you improved, but because you explained away their success. And if someone is behind you, ego says, at least you're not like them. You're doing better than most. You're already ahead. And again, you feel better. But again, you didn't grow. That's the trap. Comparison doesn't push you forward. It keeps you in place. Because no matter what you see, ego finds a way to protect your current position. If you feel behind, it reduces the gap. If you feel ahead, it inflates your status. Either way, you stay the same because you're not focused on improvement, you're focused on comparison. And comparison distracts you. It shifts your attention from your own growth to someone else's life. And that's where you lose control, because now you're not asking, how can I improve? You're asking, how do I compare? And that question
It doesn't build anything. It doesn't create progress. It doesn't move you forward. It just keeps you stuck in your current identity, constantly measuring, constantly judging, constantly reacting, instead of acting. And that's the problem. Because growth is internal. It's not about others. It's not about where they are. It's about where you are and where you're going. But ego shifts your focus. It makes everything external. It makes your value dependent on how you compare. And that's unstable. Because there will always be someone ahead. There will always be someone behind. There will always be someone better and someone worse. So if your mindset is built on comparison, it will never be stable. It will always fluctuate, always react, always depend on others. And that keeps you stuck. Because your progress is not based on your actions, it's based on your perception of others. And perception can be manipulated by ego easily. That's why you need to break it. Break the habit. Break the pattern. Break the need to compare. Because as long as you do, you're not in control. You're reacting. You're adjusting your self-worth based on something outside you. And that's not growth. That's dependence. Real growth doesn't care about others. It doesn't compare. It doesn't compete. It focuses. It builds. It improves based on one thing: your own potential, your own actions, your own direction. And when you shift to that, everything changes. Because now you're not distracted. You're not reacting. You're not justifying. You're building consistently, independently, without needing validation, without needing comparison. And that's power. Because now your progress is yours. Your growth is yours. Your life is yours. Not influenced, not controlled, not limited by what others are doing. But ego doesn't want that, because ego needs comparison. It feeds on it. It survives on it. It uses it to protect your identity. But that protection is costing you your growth. So now you have to choose. Keep comparing or start building. Keep reacting or start acting. Keep measuring your life against others or start creating your own. Because you can't do both. And whatever you choose becomes your reality. Because nobody is coming to save you. And the comparison you keep making might be the very thing keeping you exactly where you are.
There's something your ego hates more than anything: responsibility. Not small responsibility, not simple tasks, but full responsibility. The kind where you look at your life and say, "This is on me." Because the moment you say that, everything changes. There's no excuse, no escape, no one else to point at, just you and your decisions and your actions and your results. And that's heavy, uncomfortable, almost overwhelming. So your ego protects you from it, quietly, subtly, by shifting the blame. It tells you it's not your fault. The situation was unfair. You didn't have the right opportunities. People didn't support you. And sometimes those things are true. Sometimes life is unfair. Sometimes you don't get the same chances. Sometimes things are harder for you. But here's the truth. That doesn't change your responsibility. Because responsibility is not about what happened to you. It's about what you do with it. And ego doesn't want you to see that. Because if you do, you lose the excuse. You lose the comfort. You lose the ability to stay the same. Because now, It's on you, fully. And that means you have to act, you have to change, you have to improve. And that requires effort, discipline, consistency, things your ego wants to avoid. So instead, it shifts your focus outward. It makes you look at everything except yourself. It keeps you analyzing others, blaming situations, explaining why things didn't work, instead of asking, what could I have done better? And that question, it's powerful because it puts control back in your hands. But ego doesn't want that because control comes with responsibility, and responsibility comes with pressure, and pressure forces growth. So ego avoids it at all costs, even if it means keeping you stuck. Because staying the same is easier than changing. Blaming others is easier than improving yourself. Explaining failure is easier than fixing it. And that's the trap. You stay in a loop, a cycle of excuses, a cycle of blame, a cycle of inaction, where nothing really changes, because nothing is being owned. And ownership is the key. Not partial ownership, not conditional ownership, full ownership of your life, of your actions, of your results. Because the moment you take that, you gain power, real power, the power to change, the power to improve, the power to move forward. Because now, you're not waiting, you're not depending, you're not blaming, you're acting. And that's what breaks the cycle. But ego resists it, because ego prefers comfort over truth. It prefers protection over growth. It prefers staying the same over becoming more. And as long as you listen to it, you stay stuck. Not because you can't move forward, but because you won't take responsibility. And without responsibility, there is no change. There is no progress. There is no growth. Just repetition, just excuses, just the same life over and over again. Until one day, you realize nothing changed. Not because you couldn't, but because you didn't. And that realization, it's hard, because now you see it. You see how many times you avoided responsibility, how many times you blamed something else, how many times you chose comfort over ownership. And now you can't ignore it, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's where everything shifts, because now you have a choice. Keep blaming, keep explaining, keep staying the same, or take responsibility, fully, completely, without excuses, and change. Because you can't do both. You can't grow and avoid responsibility. You can't improve and keep blaming others. You can't move forward while refusing to own your life. So decide, because nobody's coming to save you, and the responsibility you keep avoiding might be the exact thing that sets you free, if you're willing to take it.
You don't just live your life, you become it. Every habit, every decision, every repeated action, it builds an identity, a version of you. And over time, that version feels real, solid, fixed. This is who I am. You say it without thinking, you believe it without questioning, you defend it without realizing, because it feels like truth. But it's not. It's a pattern, a constructed version of yourself, built from repetition. And your ego, it protects that version at all costs, even if it's limiting, even if it's outdated, even if it's holding you back. Because to your ego, identity is everything. It's how you see yourself, how you define yourself, how you stay consistent. And consistency feels safe. So when something challenges that identity, ego reacts, it resists, it pushes back, not because it's wrong,
but because it's unfamiliar, because change means becoming someone else, and that feels like losing yourself. Think about it. If you've always seen yourself as not confident, not disciplined, not that type of person, then becoming confident, becoming disciplined, becoming different feels uncomfortable. Not because it's bad, but because it doesn't match your current identity. It feels fake. It feels forced. It feels like you're pretending. And ego hates that because it wants alignment. It wants consistency. It wants you to stay the same. So it tells you, this is not you. You're not like that. Why are you trying to change? And you listen because it feels real, because it feels like you. But it's not. It's your ego trying to protect your current version, even if that version is limited, even if that version is not where you want to be. That's the trap. You don't change because you don't feel like the person who can. You don't act differently because it doesn't feel natural. You don't grow because it doesn't match your identity. So you stay in the same patterns, the same behaviors, the same version of yourself. Not because you can't change, but because you won't let yourself. Because ego convinces you this is who you are. But that's not true. Who you are is not fixed. It's flexible. It's built. It's shaped by what you do repeatedly. And that means you can rebuild it. You can become something new, but only if you're willing to let go of the old version. And that's where it gets difficult, because letting go feels like losing something, even if it's something that doesn't serve you, even if it's something you don't like. It still feels like a part of you, and ego doesn't want to lose that. So it keeps you there, keeps you comfortable, keeps you consistent, keeps you aligned with your past instead of your potential. And that's why you're stuck. Not because you don't know what to do, but doing it would require you to become someone else, someone unfamiliar, someone new, and that scares you. Because new means uncertain. New means uncomfortable. New means you don't know how it will feel. But that's exactly what growth is. Becoming someone you've never been, doing things you've never done, thinking in ways you've never thought. And that doesn't feel natural at first. It feels awkward. It feels forced. It feels like you're faking it. But you're not. You're building it. You're creating a new identity, one action at a time, one decision at a time, one step at a time, until it becomes real, until it becomes natural, until it becomes you. But you have to go through that stage, the uncomfortable stage, the unfamiliar stage, the identity shift stage. And ego will try to stop you. It will try to pull you back to your old habits, your old mindset, your old self, because that's where it feels safe. But safe is not where growth happens. Growth happens in change, in discomfort, in becoming something new. And if you avoid that, you stay the same forever. Not because you can't evolve, but because you won't evolve, because you're holding on to an identity that no longer serves you. So now you have to decide. Stay who you've always been or become who you could be. Protect your ego or transform your identity, because you can't do both. And whatever you choose will define your future, because nobody is coming to save you. And the identity you keep protecting might be the very thing keeping you from everything you want.
All this time, you thought the problem was outside. The situation, the environment, the timing. You thought something was missing. Something wasn't right. Something was holding you back. But now, after everything you've seen, everything you've felt, everything you've realized, the truth becomes clear, painfully clear. It was never outside. It was never the world. It was never other people.
It was you. Not you as a person, but something inside you, something you trusted, something you believed was helping you, but was actually holding you back. Your ego, the voice that told you, you're fine, you don't need to change, you're already doing enough. The voice that protected you from discomfort, from failure, from feeling like a beginner. And for a long time, it felt like support. It felt like confidence. It felt like self-belief. But now, you see it differently. You see how it stopped you, how it slowed you down, how it kept you in the same place, not by force, but by comfort, not by pressure, but by protection. And that's what makes it dangerous, because it doesn't look like an enemy. It looks like you. It sounds like you. It thinks like you. So you trust it, you follow it, you listen to it without questioning, and that's how it controls you, quietly, consistently, without resistance. Every time you avoided something difficult, that was ego. Every time you rejected feedback, that was ego. Every time you compared yourself, that was ego. Every time you refused to take responsibility, that was ego. Every time you stayed in your comfort zone, that was ego. It wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. It was a pattern, a system designed to keep you safe. But safety came at a cost, the cost of your growth, your potential, your future, because while ego was protecting you, it was also limiting you, keeping you small, keeping you average, keeping you exactly where you are. And you didn't see it, not clearly, not fully, because it felt normal, because it felt like you. But now you see it, and that changes everything. Because once you see the real enemy, you can't ignore it anymore. You can't go back to pretending. You can't go back to blaming. You can't go back to thinking you're just stuck. Because you're not. You never were. You were just controlled by something inside you. And now you have a choice. Continue listening to it, continue following it, continue staying the same, or challenge it, question it, go against it, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it feels wrong, because that discomfort, that resistance, that feeling of this isn't me, that's the sign that you're breaking free. Because ego doesn't like change, it doesn't like growth, it doesn't like losing control. So when you push against it, it reacts. It makes things feel harder. It makes things feel unfamiliar. It makes things feel uncomfortable. But that's not a bad thing. That's the process of becoming more, of stepping outside your current identity, of building something new. And it starts with awareness, seeing the ego, recognizing its patterns, understanding its voice, and then not blindly following it, but choosing differently, acting differently, becoming differently. Because you are not your ego. You are the one who can observe it, challenge it, change it. And that's power, real power, the kind that changes your life. Because now you're not controlled. You're in control of your thoughts, of your actions, of your direction. And that's what sets you free. Not external changes, not perfect conditions, but internal awareness and the willingness to act on it. Because nobody is coming to save you. And the only thing that was ever holding you back was the one thing you never questioned, your ego. But now you see it, and now you can rise above it, if you choose to.
There's a moment, a quiet, almost invisible moment, where everything changes. Not outside, not in your environment, but inside, in how you see yourself, in how you think, in how you respond. And it begins with something uncomfortable: letting go. Letting go of the version of you that you've been holding on to. the version that feels familiar, the version that feels safe, the version your ego has protected for so long. Because here's the truth. You can't become someone new while holding on to who you used to be. It doesn't work. Growth requires replacement, not addition. You don't just add discipline, you replace your old habits. You don't just add confidence, you replace your old mindset. You don't just add success, you replace your old identity. And that means something has to go. Something has to end. Something has to die. Not physically, but mentally. The version of you that avoids responsibility, the version of you that stays comfortable, the version of you that listens to ego more than truth, that version, it has to go. And that's not easy, because it's familiar, because it's what you've been, because it feels like losing yourself. But it's not. It's freeing yourself from limits, from patterns, from a mindset that no longer serves you. But your ego, it will fight this hard. It will try to convince you this is who you are. You can't change. You've always been like this. And for a moment, you'll believe it. You'll feel resistance. You'll feel doubt. You'll feel like going back to what's easy, back to what's known, back to what feels like you. But this time, you don't. Because now, you understand. You understand that feeling is not truth. It's ego, trying to survive, trying to stay in control, trying to keep you the same. But you're not the same anymore. Not after everything you've seen, not after everything you've realized. You're aware now, and awareness changes everything. Because now you see the patterns, you recognize the voice, you understand the trap, and that gives you power. The power to choose, not based on comfort, not based on fear, but based on growth. So when ego says, stay where you are, you move. When ego says, this is too hard, you continue. When ego says, you don't need to change, you evolve. And that's the shift. From control to awareness. From reaction to decision. From ego to growth. And it doesn't happen once. It happens daily. Every choice, every action, every moment where you decide, am I following my ego or am I following my potential? Because those two paths, they lead to completely different lives. One keeps you safe, comfortable, predictable, but limited. The other pushes you, challenges you, transforms you. And that's where the rebirth happens. Not in comfort, but in challenge. Not in ease, but in effort. Not in staying the same, in becoming something new. And slowly, that new version of you starts to take shape. Not perfect, not complete, but real. More aware, more disciplined, more in control. And over time, that version becomes stronger, more consistent, more defined, until one day you look back at the person you used to be, and it feels different, not familiar, not comfortable, but distant, because you've changed, because you've evolved, because you've let go of the version that was holding you back. And that's the rebirth. Not dramatic, not instant, but powerful, because it's real, because it's built, because it's earned. And the best part? It was always available. You just had to choose it. And now, you have. But the journey doesn't end here, because ego doesn't disappear. It stays, it watches, it waits for moments of weakness, for moments of comfort, for moments where you might go back. But now, you're ready. Now you're aware. Now you know how to respond because you've seen the truth. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So you keep moving. You keep building. You keep choosing growth over ego again and again because nobody is coming to save you. And the life you want is not given. It's created through decisions, through discipline, through awareness. And it starts right now with one simple question. Am I protecting my ego or building my future? And whatever you choose, you become. So choose wisely, because the version of you you want to become is waiting on the other side of the version you're ready to leave behind.